All right, how about we get started? Hello to everyone, and welcome to the Sustainability Leadership Presentation Series, the SLPS. I'm Jason Carball, a visiting assistant professor of biology at Hastings College and co-advisor of the Student Environmental Action Coalition, which is hosting this presentation. The SLPS is a collaboration of 8 Nebraska higher education and nonprofit partners. A couple housekeeping items. All attendees are in listen only mode to prevent any background noises, but you are invited to ask questions. You can put your questions directly into the chat box. Also, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on the SLPS YouTube channel for future viewing, which the link to the channel will eventually be posted in the chat box. I would like to welcome today's speaker, Amanda Ganglish, the Program Director for Conservation Nebraska and Nebraska Conservation Voters. She will be presenting about environmental and conservation projects happening across the state. And Amanda, I'll let you take over.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jason, and everyone else who pulled this together and got this going. I'm happy to be here. I know this is a little bit different than some of the presentations that have been given in the past. I'm not an expert researching anything by any means. So what I'm here to talk to you guys about today is advocating for the environment and the different capacities that people across the state can do that, and looking at it through the lens of our organizations that I'm a part of, understanding there are lots of great groups across the state doing lots of great work. So we are one of many advocating for the environment. So just to start off with, I was going to give just a little bit of background about the organizations for those of you who aren't aware. So there are 2 organizations, nonprofits that I work for, Nebraska Conservation Voters, which you will often hear me refer to as NCV, and then Conservation Nebraska, or CN. They're sister organizations that do a lot of partnership and work together, but also have their separate facets that they focus in on. So NCV, Nebraska Conservation Voters, protects our state's natural legacy by educating voters, advocating for sound policies, and electing conservation champions. So NCV focuses a lot on the political realm and the political landscape, where Conservation Nebraska protects our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement. So Conservation Nebraska focuses in a little bit more on communities and community members and how they can be active and a part of things. A little more background on myself. As Jason said, my name is Amanda Ganglish. I'm the program director for NCV and Conservation Nebraska. My main role within that realm is I oversee and manage our statewide education program, which houses anywhere between 20 to 30 community organizers throughout the year. So my main role is to facilitate that group. We also do a lot of other work that I will dive into a little bit. But what led me here and what got me here, I graduated from UNL with a double major in biology and environmental studies. So I was very much focused in on environmental work and environmental research, but landed in a role actually with Conservation Nebraska as a community organizer, as an AmeriCorps member, doing educational outreach. And that opened up a lot of doors for me and piqued interest for me. And then I hopped into a more permanent role in facilitating that program. So what do both of those organizations do? As I mentioned, there's a lot of overlap, but there are some points of divergent as well. So NCV focuses on education, advocacy, and election work. So most of that education and advocacy also surrounds politics and policies, where Conservation Nebraska focuses on education, advocacy, and organizing in the capacity of empowering Nebraskans to protect their natural resources through locally led community organizing. So very much the idea of grassroots organizing and helping community members organize within their communities. Where do we do this? We are statewide organization. So I know most of you tuning in are probably somewhere in that central region. either around Hastings or any of CCC's central hubs there. But we focus on statewide efforts and statewide organizing. And I know the beauty of Zoom is there's a chance that someone's tuning in from somewhere outside of those central hubs. So we try to cover as much of the state and as much ground as we can. What you're seeing here on this map are some of those main points of contact that we have, the main communities we're in, but we do branch out from there and serve other communities across the state that aren't showcased here on this map. So you can see we're as far west as Scouts Bluff, we go as high north as Valentine, Shadron, as well as South Sioux City, and then we go all the way east to Omaha, and basically everywhere in between. So we're covering a lot of ground and interacting with a lot of communities. So there's always a place for people to be involved and interact within their specific communities, which I'll get to some more examples of that here later. So how I briefly mentioned what I was in charge of and the group that I sort of helped manage and coordinate. And this is a picture of a handful of those members a few years back, when we pre-COVID times were able to meet and see people's smiling faces in person, which hopefully we're getting to here soon. But we really rely heavily on our community organizers and our volunteers to help us conduct and do the majority of our work, and the majority of the things that we are able to accomplish are in a large part due to the community organizers and volunteers that we enlist. And what we have those people do specifically, and what volunteers can also be a part of, are just a wide variety of options based off of what you might be interested in. And I'm happy to answer questions about that here towards the tail end of things. So things that we really focus in on, either through NCV or through Conservation Nebraska, are our educational events and awards. So educational events are happening across the state and covering a wide variety of topics and issues. In a large part due to our community organizers, we are able to host pre-COVID times. We were hosting around 300 events a year in person across the state, which is a lot of events, and a lot of great discussions are able to come from that, and a lot of learning opportunities are able to be created because of those events. And so we're really proud of the ability that we have to be able to host that many events across a wide area across the state, to interact with as many people and cover as many issues and topics as we possibly can. We would be remiss to not acknowledge that we do a lot of this work through partnerships. A lot of great environmental and conservation organizations exist out there, and we partner with as many of them as we can. I know Ben's hiding on this call as an attendee, but Ben Newton CCC, we've done a lot of work with them. We do a lot with UNL, UNO, as well as just other organizations and nonprofits that focus on this environmental and conservation work. And then we're constantly looking to form new partnerships and new relationships in communities across the state, focusing in on community members, city administrators, elected officials, business leaders, you name it. We would love to try to form a relationship and a partnership with them, because at the end of the day, we strongly believe that this is an issue, and these are issues that everyone needs to be involved in and everyone should be participating in some capacity. We also do a lot of canvassing and phone banking, which ties in directly to our election work as well. But this idea that we have of meeting people where they're at and engaging people on their front door or on their phone. We've found that a lot of people across the state become interested in environmental and conservation work, but it's not something that's on the forefront of their minds and in their everyday life. And so to get them interested, you have to have conversations with them and you have to bring them in. And the best way to do that is to, like I said, meet them where they're at and have initial baseline conversations with them to interact with them on some level. At the end of the day, it's all about engaging communities and interacting with the communities, whether that's through NCV and our election work and advocating and working for sound policies, or through Conservation Nebraska and engaging communities through that educational outreach, as well as enabling them to have the tools that they need to lead local efforts and have some grassroots abilities within that piece. Because the environment doesn't sleep, we don't sleep, and these changes need to be happening and occurring all the time. So we are doing things year round. So there's always a time and there's always something that you can be involved and engaged in. What I have up here is just a few of our events that we've hosted in the past year and a half, just to showcase some of those pieces. But it's not just events that are happening year round. There are plenty of opportunities to be involved in pieces and engaged in things throughout the year, depending again on what your interest is. So why do we do this? I think this is always really important to highlight the need and the reason for environmental work and conservation work across the state. And some of it ties back to there's clear room for improvement and clear things that we could be doing better, as well as there is, data and things that show that there's support for a lot of the things that we want to advocate and work for. So, just a few, there's a plethora of statistics that could be pulled for you to showcase these things, but a handful that I always go over with my community organizers are up here for you. So the idea that Nebraska ranks 32nd on environmental quality, which is a composite measure of a bunch of different things. But overall just showcases that there's room for improvement in Nebraska for environmental quality. Nebraskans per capita ranks 5th in the country in the amount of garbage that we send to landfills. So again, room for improvement on areas of our life here in the state. And then going to this idea that there's also support for a lot of the issues that we are talking about and working through. 80% of rural Nebraskans agree that more should be done to develop solar or wind energy in Nebraska. 60% of Nebraskans believe they'll need to do something within their lifetime to deal with climate change. And then there's a growing market within some aspects, specifically clean energy jobs in Nebraska, where there are currently more than 19,000 clean energy jobs. So again, just a few pulled out, and I'll give a couple more stats here as we move forward. But there is obvious room for improvement within the state, as well as support within the state for these areas of improvement. So why we're doing this is because there's a statewide need for improved environmental stewardship. And along with that, I would also say that there's a statewide desire for improved environmental stewardship. There are people who want to see things improve and things be better within the environmental stewardship of our state. So that's where you guys can come in. And, a bulk of what I'll talk about here at the tail end of things is how you can be engaged, give a few examples of what that looks like and what the results were in some cases that we've seen. And then I truthfully am going to leave a lot of time to just answer any questions that people might have, because I think where I can really help and really direct people in this front is to answer questions. So be thinking of questions that you might have about how you as an individual can be engaged, other organizations that you could potentially partner with, whatever I can help with in there. I'll leave plenty of time here at the end for those questions. So just a few things that people can do to stay involved. I always say stay engaged and stay informed. And that can encompass a wide variety of things and be different for each individual, depending on what your comfort level is, what you want to learn and grow in, what you want to understand better. But ultimately, your baseline effort should be to stay engaged and stay informed, whether that's through our organization or engaging with other organizations, or all of us. We're all doing different things, but similar things at the same time. So signing up for newsletters, being on email lists, attending events, ways to stay engaged and stay informed are important. You can volunteer. So again, we have a wide variety of volunteer options within our organization, whether that's planning an event, helping us, when it comes election season, write postcards, knock on doors, make phone calls, whether that's attending a litter cleanup or spending some time in one of our community gardens. Volunteering is a great way to stay engaged and stay informed on these issues. You can donate, you can share. When I think of sharing, I think of talking with a friend, talking with your family members, having conversations with people about the things that you're learning about and the things you're engaging in, so that we can start to grow the network of people who are involved and the people who are engaged in these issues. We constantly need to be bringing people in, and the easiest way to do that is to talk to them. So the more you can talk with your friends and your family and your network, the more people we can bring in to do the same. And then suddenly we're engaging people on a large facet across the entire state. So one example I wanted to give people is how this, volunteer, being involved, staying engaged kind of led to something, and give you sort of that concrete example of why it's important for this. So the lens I'm gonna focus this through on is through NCV's sort of election and advocacy work, and give some specific examples within that, understanding that this is not the only avenue, and that some people don't want to volunteer and be involved in election work, which is totally understandable, and I get. So the lens I'm giving is through that, but there are other opportunities outside of the election world as well. So one thing I always like to focus in on is that we as an organization very much focus on ensuring that our state's elected officials, whether that's through the legislature, our public power districts, our natural resource districts, are supporting policies that we all care about, that are focused on environmental issues like energy and water and so many other things. So one example is in the state legislature, we always work towards action towards climate change and passing a climate action plan and working with legislatures to have that happen. With our public power districts, we are working on a transition towards clean energy and away from fossil fuels, especially as we see the price point for clean energy continue to decline and become less expensive than the alternatives in fossil fuel generation. So to accomplish this, we organize Nebraskans across the state on a wide variety of issues, both leading up to elections and post-election, because that's an important piece of things, is not only getting good people elected, conservation champions elected, but then also working with them and holding them accountable to actually see and enact this change that we've talked about and worked with them on. In Nebraska, because of our makeup, we have a unique opportunity to really make that difference and really be involved in that. And that primarily can be seen through our public power districts. We're the only state that's 100% public power, which means we elect the board of directors who ultimately can guide our public power in making decisions and where we go in the future with things. So that's one of the wins I'm going to focus in on, was the idea that Nebraska was a coal state. So before NCV really picked up work in this field and really started recruiting candidates and working in these elections for public power, Nebraska was really locked in and focused on fossil fuels. So an example of that is between 2000 and 2015, Nebraska's carbon emissions increased by more than 22%, which was more than any other state in the country did in that same time frame. So this was largely due to the fact that Nebraska built new coal plants during that time frame, while other states, a good portion of states across this country, were shutting down their coal plants. So we saw an increase in our carbon emissions because we were building new coal plants, while other states were shutting theirs down and looking to clean energy in that future. As recently as 2016, Nebraska only ranked 20th in the country in installed wind capacity and wind energy potential, when in reality, we rank 3rd in the country in what we could be doing in wind potential, and then 13th in solar potential. So Nebraska is a state where we could see a lot of great potential and a lot of good growth with wind and solar, because we have it there. I think most of us can remember a really windy day or a really sunny day and recognize that because of our state topography, we have a really great makeup for wind and solar. But we're not there yet, and we're not accomplishing that. And we recognize that both as an organization as well as some of our partner organizations. So we really started to put pressure and effort into recruiting and electing conservation champions within our public power board, so that we could start to see a shift, which is something that was accomplished and something that we saw. So in the past few election cycles, we've seen clean energy champions and conservation champions elected to public power boards, which has allowed us to grow clean energy across the state. So several of our new board members were elected to the primary three, the big three public power districts in our state. So those are Omaha Public Power District, or OPPD, Nebraska Public Power District, NPPD, or Lincoln Electric System, which is LES, which has allowed us to transition away from coal, which is where we were, again, from 2000 to 2015. So Nebraska has gone from the state that was adding the most coal over the last decade to a state that's investing in clean energy. So in 2017, both NPPD and OPPD launched their first community solar programs. So we saw an increase in solar there immediately. Nebraska saw more wind energy growth than any other state in both 2018 and 2019. So we're also seeing us starting to leverage that wind potential that we have as a state. In fact, from 2016 to 2020, so just in 4 years right there, the wind energy doubled as a share of Nebraska's electricity generation. And then solar energy experienced a 700% increase. I'll repeat it again because it's not a mistake, 700% increase in solar energy, which is huge, a huge transition for a state, understanding where we were just in the decade previously. And importantly to note, a lot of this has more of an impact than just a transition to clean energy. We also see that these advances and transitions towards clean energy increases our investment in rural communities. It helps us with investment in our schools and emphasizes that investing in clean energy not only means protecting our air and our water, but it also means that we're revitalizing rural areas and showing economic development in these areas as well, which is huge, is a huge factor and another reason we should continue to transition towards clean energy. And this wouldn't have been possible without volunteers and without community organizers. One of the pictures I showed way at the beginning showed our core staff here at NCV, which is only 5 people. So that's a small core staff with a large role that we want to play in this. And the way that we do that and the way that we succeed in that is by leveraging and working with volunteers and organizers across the state to help us, again, pre-election, leading to election, and then post-election, and holding these communities accountable. So that is just one area where we've seen a success and where we've seen wins. And a lot of it, again, was due to our volunteer network and our community organizers across the state. So another area that we are starting to see a big shift in, and where a lot of people are going to start coming in and helping us with things, is in the front of water and water quality and water conservation. And this is another place where Nebraska is really unique and where we have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good, because we have a system of natural resource districts, or NRDs, which again is an elected public office. It's governed primarily by their board of directors, who are all elected officials. And we, I believe, are the only state that also has that true elected public organization that is overseeing our groundwater and our drinking water. So this is important because 85% of Nebraskans get their drinking water from the ground. And most of those, again, are found in rural areas of the state. So a vast majority of Nebraskans are getting their drinking water from the ground. But we're seeing that that water is not great in terms of quality. So 2018, what was then the Department of Environmental Quality, or DEQ, which is now the Department of Energy and Environment, which is DEE, has found that 83% of lakes and 39% of stream miles are impaired. And an impairment just means that the water quality did not meet state requirements for at least one of its designated uses, which could be recreation, it could be drinking water, it could be irrigation. Regardless of what its designation was, it was found that that water quality did not meet state requirements. And in some cases, those water sources had multiple impairments. So it didn't meet state requirements on multiple issues. And that's not great. Again, going back to this idea that Nebraska and Nebraskans rely heavily on this groundwater. A 2014 report found that Nebraska's waterways were the 6th worst in the nation for toxic pollution. So again, this idea that there is so much room for improvement and so much room for growth within our state on water quality issues. 2018, so a more recent study, found that 40% of surface water samples tested had nitrate levels at or above 10 parts per million. I won't get into a whole lot of detail about what parts per million means, but a baseline understanding that the EPA has set 10 parts per million as the maximum safe level of nitrates in drinking water. So right under half, 40% of our surface water was at that level or higher. in terms of what the Environmental Protection Agency has set as a safe level of nitrates in our drinking water. And we focus a lot in on nitrates because we just continue to see contamination in our waterways with nitrates. So in the last 3 decades, nitrate contamination in Nebraska has doubled, indicating that our water quality is not getting better, it's getting worse. We continue to see increasing levels of contamination. And again, we focus a lot in on nitrates because we know a lot of what nitrates can lead to. There's been extensive research conducted on this, and we know that high nitrate ingestion has been connected to cancer. I think the most common thing people think of is blue baby syndrome. So it's been connected to blue baby syndrome, birth defects, thyroid disease, and macular degeneration. So high nitrate levels being ingested, which we're seeing in some of our waterways and right under half of our waterways, we're seeing that high level of nitrate ingestion, or high level of nitrate contamination, excuse me. And we're continuing to learn more about this nitrate levels and what it can mean. So UNMC has been conducting research into the connection between high nitrates in Nebraska's groundwater and our state's high rate of pediatric cancer. So we're continuing to learn more and continuing to research more on what high nitrate levels are doing as they're being ingested and as they're being continually put into our water systems. So wrapping it up, coming full circle. So what does that mean you could do? If we're going to look at things through the lens of water quality and water quality issues, again, I couldn't emphasize more. The biggest thing is to stay engaged and to stay informed. The more you learn about the issue, whether again, that's water, clean energy, or another issue that you care and are passionate about, the more you stay engaged, the more you stay informed, the more you can be involved. And everyone's involvement is going to look different. And I think everyone has a different level that they're comfortable with or that they want to learn more about and be engaged in. And I think that's great. We need people who want to call people and knock on doors and do petitions. We need people who want to write letters to the editor to highlight the issue that they're seeing or are passionate about. We need people to attend events and bring a friend or bring a family member so that we can engage more people in the conversation. We need people who are willing to share and have conversations with other people about these issues. We need people who are going to volunteer. There's so many different things that you can do to be involved in these issues and be engaged in these issues. And I think, you know, whatever level that is for you is a great level and is something that we should explore and continue to dive into. So as I'm wrapping up, if there are questions about, I want to do this or I'm interested in this, please feel free again to put those either in the chat or the Q&A, and I'm happy to answer those questions to the best of my ability. But ultimately, we want you to be engaged and we want you to stay informed, and that is the end all be all, if you will, of what you can be doing, because that leads to your involvement and that allows you to continue to grow and continue to understand the issues and then continue to be involved and advocate, whether for better policies, for elected officials, for continuing improvement within our communities. That involvement is a key component of what my organization is doing, what we're doing, and what so many other great environmental organizations across the state are doing. Having that involvement from community members is the backbone and is the key. And so to whatever capacity we can have you, we will take you and we will utilize that passion and that drive that you have and, you know, get you involved with what you care about and those issues that you're passionate about. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions and take what I can to help guide you on whether it's specific volunteer or advocacy work, whether it's general questions about that issue. I am happy to answer what I can on that front.
All right, thank you, Amanda, for giving a great presentation. As she stated, you can ask her questions through the chat box, which, Amanda, there is a question already for you by Ben. What are some solutions or strategies Nebraska is doing to reduce nitrate levels in groundwater?
Oh, Ben, that's a loaded question. So there's a lot. There is a lot, and I think there's a growing desire to continue to do more. One of the big pieces that we're focusing on right now is just the educational side of things and helping people be more aware. So within our organization, we're finding a lot of people just don't necessarily really comprehend the length of the issue and the depth of the issue. So we're doing a lot to continue educational outreach through that front. So one great thing that we're doing as an organization and partnering with a few other great environmental organizations is a citizen science water project that specifically allows people to test their own water with a very quick, easy, simple at-home test kit that we will have available for people starting in May. That allows them to test not only for nitrates, but for phosphates as well. So giving people just that quick information right there at their well or at their tap about what's in their water specifically, and then just continuing to engage conversations with people about their water quality in their area. And then on a more top tier level, it's about engaging in conversations about how we can shift and change practices within our states to help us lower that contamination level. There are a wide variety of facets for where that contamination comes from. So there's a wide variety of options and solutions that we can enlist and engage to help us address the nitrate levels and other contamination levels in our groundwater across the state. So it's having those top tier conversations with people and those stakeholders as well on what we can do to change the system and improve the system.
And then we have first we had a comment from Diane saying that we are fortunate to have NCV and Conservation Nebraska in the state doing such good work. Thanks for that. And then she continues on with some questions, a series it looks like here for you, Amanda. When you are doing on the ground work in rural Nebraska, how do you actually meet the rural residents? Do you go door knocking, have community meetings? What kind of acceptance resistance do you find in rural Nebraska, and how do you find it's best to counter the resistance?
Okay, I will try to hit all of those pieces, Diane, and if I miss one, feel free to follow up. Well, I'll come at this from the lens of pre-COVID times, because I think COVID has changed everyone's approach to things and how we've done things, but I think we're also starting to get back to that sense of normalcy and where we would normally be. So we do engage people on basically all of the fronts that were listed there that Diane mentioned. So we go to their doors. So we're knocking on doors and having conversations with them. We're hosting community meetings and community events to try to engage people on different issues and conversations within those fronts. In terms of how we're communicating with them and how we're interacting with them, one of the big focuses that we have in this organization and how we approach things comes from, I'll get a little in depth on some pieces here, done from research that came from Yale and Columbia in terms of environmental decision making. And what they found in that research is that for people to be receptive and be understanding of environmental decisions and environmental processes, they need to understand things at a level that's relevant to their lives. And that conversation and that message needs to come from trusted sources. So what we focus a lot in on our organization is having those conversations through those trusted sources, which is either, it can be a wide variety of people. Oftentimes it's fellow community members. So we place community members in my organization that I'm in charge of. They're placed where they're from. So the member that I have out in Scottsbluff who's doing community organizing lives in Scottsbluff. It's not someone we picked up and dropped off there. It was someone who grew up and has lived in Scottsbluff. So they are very much involved in that community. It can be other officials, it can be elected officials, it can be professors, it can be so many different people, but we're engaging those people to have these conversations. And then those conversations we just make relevant to their lives. So we focus in on a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of the issues that happen specifically in the rural communities, and how whatever, specific solution that we're talking about in that front can benefit that community or benefit that region, to make things as relevant to them and as clear to them as they can. And then it's just continuing to have conversations. You do see some resistance, and you do see some people who just don't understand in the forefront some of these complex issues, which is completely understandable. A lot of us don't. I did it before I started educating myself on these pieces. And so it's just continuing to have conversations to help them understand and answer their questions and be understanding and work with them to the best of our ability. I think I hit all our points.
So another question for you. This is by Maddie. Does your organization ever hold events for picking up trash around waterways or parks? Could clearing out waterways of trash positively impact nitrate levels in water?
First part of the question, yes, as well as several other organizations do cleanups. There's so many Keep America Beautiful affiliates across our state that are doing amazing and wonderful work in regards to cleanups. So we do some cleanups around waterways. To what extent they would impact nitrate levels, I'm sure there is some extent. I will not give a definitive answer because I don't have enough background knowledge to state for sure that we've seen that. But in terms of impairments and pollutants, a part of what is entering our water systems are those sorts of litter and trash pieces of things. And so I would feel pretty confident in saying that there is some impact in cleaning those up. The extent of that impact, I cannot give you a definitive number though.
And then Matt has asked, what could a small student-led organization like SEEK at Hastings College do in order to help speed up, encourage the use of more renewable energy sources instead of fossil fuels?
That's a great question, Matt. And I think there's a lot of different options and a lot of different pathways you can take. So again, going back to the root message that I will continue to push always and forever is staying engaged and staying involved. So continuing to educate yourself and your group and your student-led organization about the issues. And then just being involved where you guys feel comfortable and have the capacity to be involved. So whether that's hosting events at the community, at the school about the specific issue, whether that's engaging with our organization or another organization in the area to have those conversations. You know, I know some of the larger universities have larger student groups, but they've been able to do some pretty amazing stuff as well when it comes to having conversations about university divestment or other areas of improvement within the school itself and the college itself. So there's, you know, examples out there as well that can be pulled within that front for what student organizations can do. But I really think it's just about, you know, getting involved and finding an organization or a group of organizations that you feel connected and passionate with, and, you know, seeing what you can do to help in those fronts, in those areas.
Let's see here. Another question, if I can find it here, from Ben. Does Conservation Nebraska also manage community gardens throughout the state, or do they volunteer?
Both. So it depends on the community, Ben. So there are some communities where we have our own plots within those community garden systems that we plant, we do all of that stuff on. And then there's some where we just help out where they need help and send volunteers, whether that's through my community organizer members in those areas or enlisting volunteers from regular community members that we have in the area. So depending on the community, we have some community gardens that we run completely ourselves. And then in some communities, the capacity that they needed was more in the volunteer area. So that's where we fill in and support where we can. So it's a yes to both questions.
Are there any other questions for Amanda or anything you would like her to expand on that she's already answered? Just wait for a little bit.
No worries. What I will put out there while we wait for that is if something comes to you later, feel free to reach out. So my contact information is up there now, or both NCVs and Conservation Nebraska can be found online, social media. So you can feel free to reach out to us through those as well. If you're like me, sometimes that question comes to you in the middle of the night. So feel free to reach out with those questions, and we're happy to help in whatever capacity we can.
And a question here from Matt. What is your favorite environmental project that you've ever been involved in?
Ooh, Matt with a loaded question. I think for me, one of my favorite twofold. There's two projects. So last year, some of my community organizers ran a very cool and very engaged community garden in the city of Omaha, which it was just fun to watch that grow and develop and see the pieces that came together from that. So that was more from my manager side. I wasn't as involved in that project hands-on wise. In terms of hands-on project, I think one of the coolest things we've seen as an organization is Omaha Public Power District was the first large utility in the state to commit to a decarbonization goal. So it's 100% net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And that was the first one in the state. And a lot of that was due to a lot of hard work, both by us at the organization and our volunteers. And so it was really cool to actually see something in terms of a physical output, if you will, from all of the hard work and hours spent on advocating and working towards that goal. So I think that was probably the coolest project I've been a part of that I put in a lot of effort for.
Any other questions? We have some general comments about, thank you for the program and hearing from you, Amanda.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm just waiting for a few seconds here, so see if there's any other questions.
Always got to give them time to type it out.
Sure. All right, I don't think there are any other questions. Overall, thank you again, Amanda, for giving us a great presentation. And thank you everyone for attending the March SLPS. Please join us next time as Joslin Institute will be hosting on April 6th at 11:30 a.m. Resiliency Planning in Local Food Systems will be the topic, featuring Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities President and CEO Cecil Stewart, Nancy Williams, co-founder and CEO of No More Empty Pots, Tim Ryan, Nebraska and Lincoln Food Policy Council, and Mickey Esposito, Senior Policy Advisor to the Mayor for the Resilient Lincoln Initiative. This will conclude today's presentation. Again, thank you for attending.